Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Belinda, and if it's your first time here, make sure to hit the subscribe button. You can expect a lot more content on academia, any qualifications I'm up to, career, and lifestyle. So recently, actually, I have been talking about my moving to the UK journey. I've invited a few guests to come along and describe their journey as well. And today I wanted to close off that series with settling in the UK. So this is tends to be an aim for a lot of people who relocate to the UK, which is to finally get the indefinite leave to remain. So I'll be going through the tier 2 route because that's the one I went through. That's the one I'm most familiar with, where you relocate to, actually I relocated mainly to study, then I got a job, but essentially it's for someone who's relocated to work, and then basically how you can qualify to apply for your ILR. So I'll be talking about the different requirements, expanding a little bit on them, and I'm happy to cover any further things that you think I need to add on in a Q&A, in a separate Moving to UK Q&A. So engage with me in the comments. Let me know what else you'd like to know about my journey or even just the process in general, and I'll get back to you. So when you're using the skilled worker visa route to settle in the UK, for you to be eligible to apply for ILR, the first requirement is time in the UK. So when you're using the skilled worker route, you need to have worked in the UK, lived and worked in the UK for 5 years. Now, the 5 years starts when you essentially, so for someone who's already in the UK, it starts literally the day of your BRP. When your BRP is issued, that's the first day of your eligibility period. And for me, I got a 3-year tier 2 visa and then another 3 years. So by the second year of my renewed skilled worker visa BRP, by that second year I was eligible, because of course 3 plus 3 is 6, so you can wait until the end of the 6, but for me literally when the 5th year clocked, I was good to go. There's some people, especially in the medical, when they have the medical visa, you're able to even get a 5-year tier 2 right away. So literally by the time your BRP is expiring, then you're ready to go. Something that's important to highlight when it comes to time in the UK is that you need to have been resident during those 5 years. It doesn't mean you can't travel, but you can't have left the country for 180 days at a time. So that when you leave the country for more than 180 days, it means you're not really a tax resident in the country. So a very important thing, because you'll be asked in your application form, is to keep track of every time that you've left the UK and for how long. So there's like actually my former employer gave me like a spreadsheet just to cover all the days I left the country, and through that you work out and see if you're still eligible. But simply put, during those each year that you're a resident in the UK, you need to not have left the country for more than 180 days. So keep track. If you know that you're working towards settling in the UK, please keep track of every time you and left the country and come back, because you will need to provide all those dates. And as part of this, you also need to give justification for leaving the country. So normally for me, and normally especially if you work in the UK, unless you're leaving the country for work, which is fine because your employer will say that, you do need to get a letter from your employer essentially justifying why you left the country those times. So not the most common reason is because you're on annual leave, and your employer should be able to corroborate that. So in the letter that they give you to support your application, they need to state that the reasons why you left was because of annual leave. And depending on how your work tracks your annual leave, they should be able to see anyway that the dates align if they're really keen to make sure each date matches. For example, for me, I was in an audit firm, so my timesheets, it's a very simple check that they can check in and see that actually that time I was on annual leave. But the other times I left for business, which again, they should be able to have a record of that. So you will need your employer to corroborate the times that you left the country just to justify why you left. It's a weird one. It's like you're being policed, but it's just what needs to be done. So time in the UK is one bit, and that tends to be the most important bit. It's not the only, there are other elements like financial, which I'll get to in a bit, but the time in the UK is what is you can easily get wrong, especially if you've been leaving the country for long periods of time. It just means your 5 years in the UK will be actually might span over a longer period, because you're in those 5 years that you've counted, you were not necessarily fully resident in the UK. So moving on to the financial requirements. So depending on your if you have a skilled worker visa, it's usually against a certain occupation code, and each occupation code has like a average salary for it. They call it the annual going rate. So you need to be just earning the annual going rate relevant to your occupation code. And this is something that you can find on the gov.uk website, just to see the list of all the occupation codes and the annual going rate. But for you to even have a skilled worker visa, you need to be your employer needs to be offering you essentially above that. It's a requirement for the tier 2 visa. So this one doesn't tend to be an issue, because if you're coming from a tier 2 visa to the ILR, you already should be within the financial requirements. And then also, if you have any, you can normally, like when you qualify, if you have dependents, they also become eligible same time as you, essentially. So that's something I don't have too much information on, because I didn't necessarily need to have any dependents, but it's something that you can look into. I will link the gov.uk website, but normally you're the one who is like sponsoring them. They're on your visa, so as you become eligible, they normally become eligible with you. The next requirement is the Life in the UK test. So by the time you're applying for your ILR, you need to have done your Life in the UK test beforehand. It's something I actually enjoyed doing. So you can book when you go to the gov.uk website, and you essentially go to ILR. They list out the requirements as clear as day. It's actually what I'm using as a reference to remember some of the things I needed to get. So Life in the UK, you'll see the approved providers on the gov.uk website. Just book. It was £50. And it's one of those tests where it's not hard, but it's not easy. So please do not book the test and not read. You do need to read. And the book, the Life in the UK test, is usually essentially where you go to book. You can buy the online version. I bought a digital version. I was just reading through it, and it was very interesting. I got to understand a lot of things. Like, I didn't realize the influence of the UK on a lot of things. Even the King James version of the Bible was because of King James. Like, when you just put two and two together, because I wasn't brought up in the UK, so it's not, and I did the local system for my country, Kenya. So it's not like I knew much about, other than the fact that they colonized us. I didn't know much about the kings and queens and whatnot. So if you read it like it's a novel, a fictional novel, though it wasn't fictional, you'll get to really understand a lot about the history, but you do need to have passed Life in the UK test for you to apply for ILR. I won't go into too much detail, but if you do want me to cover, it's actually, I might, I know this was meant to conclude the series, but if you guys are interested in me covering how I prepared for the Life in UK test, let me know in the comments, and I'll probably do another video to cover it. So just going back to the requirements, on the financial requirements bit, I forgot to mention, as much as you also need to be earning kind of similar to what you're earning now if you're on a skilled worker visa, you do need your employer to confirm that they still need you on the job. So there's a lot of employer, both on the time in the UK, if you ever left, they need to corroborate that, that yes, you left for annual leave or whatever. Also, when it comes to financial requirement, they do need to state that they need you for the job. So you're still going to be employed in that role that earns you above the annual going rate for your occupation code. Most companies, especially if they sponsor, that means that they already know that you will probably be eligible for ILR, and they already have a template of the letter that they know they need to give you. So just reach out to your HR, tell them you're applying for an ILR, and said what you need. They normally will know. Like for me, the minute I said I'm applying for ILR, they already said make sure you log all the times you left. We're going to check that against our internal records. But in case your employer is not aware of what they need to provide, it's very clearly stated within the gov.uk website. You can go in and see what exactly they need to justify and corroborate as part of your application. Okay, and how to apply? You apply online. I did not choose a lawyer. There is no need to use a lawyer, at least that's my opinion. I don't think you need a lawyer unless you're appealing or there's something wrong. The checklist is very clear. Normally when you'll fill in the online application form just as how you'd fill in for any other visa. You will get a document checklist at the end. So the form is quite long, because especially I had left the country quite a lot of times, so having to log each of those instances, and they asked me for the last 10 years. But of course, when you're trying to check if you're eligible, the focus is on the last 5 years. But when you're filling in the visa, they just ask for the last 10 years, put your travel history, That threw me by my surprise, and I've traveled a lot in the last 10 years, so that took a bit of time. But when you fill in the form, it's very straightforward. You get a document checklist at the end of all the documents you need to provide, and that's why it should be as clear as day what you need to ask your employer, because it will clearly say letter from employer for ABCD. Yeah, and the application period for them to get the processing time for them to get back to you is 6 months standard. I would not recommend you go for the standard, because within 6 months, I mean, unless you're sure you're not going to travel, that I wasn't sure of, because you can't leave the country when you have submitted your application. That's the standard time, but I went for fast track. Fast track, you can pay £500 and you get a decision within 5 working days, or you can even pay 800 and you get a decision the next working day. I was okay with 5 working days, but of course, depending on your pocket, you can decide, you know what, I want to submit today and tomorrow I have my decision. It's really down to you. But yeah, I would definitely recommend you fast track at least the 5 working day one, because 6 months versus 5 working days, this is what determines whether you stay in the UK or not. I wouldn't wait that long. But if you know you won't leave the country, then it's up to you again, and also financial circumstances also dictate whether you can or can't. But yeah, I think, let me know any questions that you have, but I think it was very straightforward for me. It just has a lot of paperwork because of quite a few documents you need to provide, compared to, I had to even provide my bank statement, 3 months bank statement, which when I was doing my skilled worker visa, I didn't need to, because that one was purely like sponsored by an employer. But this one, they want to see that you won't be an issue to them, because once you get your ILR, by the way, you can even claim benefits. You can study, work. You're not tied to your employer, because a worker visa, you have to be tied to your, you're not tied, but at least for you to even change jobs, it's not as easy. You have to apply for visa again. But this one, you can change jobs, like, as frequent as you want. You can work, you can study, you can basically you can stay here for as long as you want. It's permanent leave to remain, and normally you become eligible for citizenship by naturalization 1 year after you've gotten your ILR issued. So it's quite a good, safe residence permit to have. So I would encourage you that as soon as you become eligible, go for it. So yeah, let me know what else you need to know, and see you on the next one. Bye.